Hello, I'm Nina Jonio. I'm a neurological reorganization practitioner, and my company is Neurodevelopmental Solutions. I'm going to start out by letting you know a little bit about how I got into neurological reorganization, and then I'm going to tell you what neurological reorganization is. I got into neurological reorganization about 23 years ago, and it was because of my children. I have a son who had full-blown rage, uncontrolled, from the day he was born. And it didn't matter if you didn't give him a cookie or whatever, he just had rages. They never knew when they would come. And I did what every good mother would do. I went to neurologists and psychologists and nutritionists and read books and did everything I could think of to try and help my child, and I could not figure out what was wrong. He also had other issues in terms of attention and not being able to read. But we finally found Florence Scott, who is one of the original founders of this work back in the 1950s. She evaluated my son at about age 7 and told me that he had limbic rage, which is a seizure disorder. But instead of having a seizure, you have a rage because it's in a different part of the brain. I can't tell you how good that made me feel. Not that my son had a seizure disorder, but it wasn't just my parenting that was making him have all the rages. So we started doing this program, and within a month, his rages were gone. That doesn't mean we were finished. We were not finished. We did it for a lot longer, but it made such a difference. I do believe that he would be in some kind of an institution now if we hadn't done this work. My younger son had a stroke at birth, so one side of his body didn't work correctly and he didn't speak. They're both now lovely adults who are functioning in the world and not living with me. So I figure I'm a good parent. So it made such a difference in our lives that I decided I had to change the course of my life and do this. I begged, pleaded, and cajoled Florence Scott to train me, and she did. I interned with her in Germany and in Oregon and have been doing this work ever since. It is the best job in the world. It's following my bliss, and I hope everybody can follow their bliss. Now I'm going to start telling you about neurological reorganization and what it is. And how does it help? We're going to find out what normal neurological function is and what abnormal neurological function looks like. We're also going to look at how we address these issues and how you can be successful with this program, because it's not an easy program. It is a tricky program. It's hard work, but it's certainly worth it. You put the time in now, or you put the time in forever. Neurological reorganization is based 100% on normal neurological development. There isn't anything we made up in it. There is a plan put in place to develop good neurology. And if we get out of babies' ways and let them do it, it'll happen in most cases. Some cases it won't happen. Trauma, injury, other things happen. And then we have to step in. We use movement, reflex, and sensory experience to address the levels of the brain that we are addressing, which are precortical levels. Research has long now confirmed that there is a correlation between movement and brain growth, and there is neuroplasticity. Our program is also totally non-invasive, drug-free, can't hurt anyone. Now, how does the brain gain function? There's a developmental sequence that begins in utero and lasts till about age 6 or 8. It's, like I say, a plan that is put in place. There are things that every unimpaired, unimpeded infant will do if given the chance. And this is what we replicate, and we will talk about it in greater length later. There is an additional brain growth spurt in adolescence, and that's one of the reasons why adolescence is so tough. They're trying to adjust to all of these things, and that's the last big natural brain growth spurt. The process that organizes the levels of the brain that are called the medulla, the pons, the midbrain level, and the cortex. Now we're going to be focusing primarily on the precortical levels of the brain, the preverbal levels of the brain, the ones that don't speak or think. And again, this is all documented by research now. It used to be that they thought that at the age of 3, the brain you had was the brain you had, and you had no choice. If If you got an injury, you had an injury and that's it. Nothing was going to change. Now that they have these great SPECT scans and MRIs and functional MRIs, they've been able to prove that movement causes brain growth and that there is neuroplasticity. It lasts throughout our whole entire life. Now, how can the brain change? All kinds of stimuli cause change. There's good stimuli and there's bad stimuli. The veterans that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan who have post-traumatic stress disorder have had a bad stimuli. Bad stimuli can affect levels of the brain at any time in our life because post-traumatic stress disorder is a brain injury in one of these low precortical levels of the brain. There's also good stimuli, and that's what we do. And the good stimuli actually grows connections and organizes those levels. That's what we're aiming for. What can affect brain function? Well, today's society, a lack of an opportunity to do the developmental sequence. In the first year of life, babies should be allowed to move. They should be on their tummies, they should be on their hands and knees moving. Today's children, very rarely do I see anyone who's done any tummy crawling. And that's because we have all these buckets and containers and wonderful things to put our children in. We have bouncy seats, we have exercisers, we have jolly jumpers. We have all these wonderful things to keep our babies happy and clean and safe, but it's stealing their neurology. They need the movement to form good brain connections. And most of the children I see right now are post-institutionalized adopted children simply because they have found that what we do works and there's quite a need for it. But babies need to move. Another thing that can affect brain function is prenatal stress. One of the reasons why my children both had issues is because I had some of the most stressful pregnancies you can have. I threatened to lose my babies constantly, and so I was on bed rest the whole pregnancy. Never knew if I was going to have a baby. As a fetus developing in utero in a soup of cortisol and epinephrine and adrenaline, it's not a very good environment, and it really can affect them, which is what affected my children. Also, birth trauma. 7 out of 10 babies are injured at birth. This is a fact. It's a studies done on 3 different continents. Under the best of circumstances, getting born is tricky. And most babies, now all of these things are on a scale. So it can be something from very, very tiny to being dead and everything in between. But 7 out of 10 babies have free-flowing blood in their spinal fluid when they're born. And the only reason for that is a brain injury. Now most babies, if given the opportunity, can rehabilitate themselves from that brain injury. If they're allowed to move, if they're given sensory experience, if all of these things happen, they can rehabilitate themselves. But when they're put in buckets and containers, not so much. Another thing is bonding breaks. With the adopted children that I see, bonding breaks are huge. Bonding breaks can actually cause brain injury, which is why what we do works. Also, poor infant nutrition. In the first year of life, 70% of the nutrition we take in goes to brain growth. So if you're getting poor nutrition in that first year of life, the brain is not developing as well as it should. Neglect, trauma, abuse, all of those things also cause brain injury. And it doesn't matter if you're 1 month old or 40 years old or 60 years old, it still will cause injury. And then there's also traumatic brain injury. Get hit by a car, your brain is going to be injured, and we can help deal with that because the brain has so much neuroplasticity. First, we're going to talk about normal neurological development because that's what our work is based on. Now, this chart represents normal neurological development from birth to about ages 6 for girls and 8 for boys. Boys do develop slower neurologically than girls. That's just in the DNA. And the right side of the chart has to do with how we take in information, how we see, how we hear, and how we feel. The left side of the chart has to do with how we put out information, how we move, how we communicate, and our hand function. So the right side is sensory, the left side is motor. Now, when I'm going to be speaking about this, I'm going to be speaking in terms of absolutes, and I want you to know I know nothing in nature happens absolutely. Nobody develops in these nice little straight lines and boxes. So when a baby's first born, she comes with all the parts included. But just like she has little legs that she can't walk on yet, there are parts of her brain that are not available to her yet. And the process that makes more of the brain available is called myelinization. And myelin is like a white fatty substance that covers the nerves, much like the insulation on an electrical cord. And when the baby is first born, the myelin is through to about the first level, the medulla and the cord. The medulla is reflex, reflex, reflex. Everything in the medulla is reflex. In terms of vision, doctor shines a light in the baby's eyes, pupils contract, take it away, pupils expand. In terms of hearing, you do that, you get that whole body response from the newborn. In terms of tactile, if you stroke a newborn's cheek, she's going to turn to suck, and it doesn't matter if it's a finger or a nipple. It's just a reflex. In terms of movement, this little baby has arms and legs that aren't paralyzed yet, but if you put that newborn down and come back 10 minutes later, she'll be in about the same spot. No real purposeful movement yet. In terms of language, this little baby has this sweet little birth cry that just says, "Here I am, I'm alive," and that's all it's saying. In terms of hand function, you could put your finger in that baby's hand, she'll hold on really tight. In fact, doctors used to pick them up and let them hang there like little trapeze artists in the delivery room. And if dads were in there, they'd say, "Hey, look how strong my kid is." It's not so much how strong they are, it's that they can't let go yet. So the whole first level, again, reflex, reflex, reflex. Now moving up to the next level, the pons. The pons develops typically in about a 1 to 5 month old, and the pons is responsible for all vital life-preserving activity. It's the level of the brain where all of our fear and anxiety come from. It's the level of the brain where all of our feeling safe, secure, attached, and bonded, or not safe, secure, attached, and bonded comes from. This is the level of the brain that gets affected by trauma, bonding breaks, stress, and this is the level, very deep emotional level. It gives us that sense of, I deserve to be in the world, and the world's an okay place. Or not. In terms of vision, this little baby sees outlines, loves to look at a face, any face will do, because they can't distinguish detail. But it is that gazing into another human's face that starts the whole bonding process. It starts activating the mirror neuron system, which gives us comfortable eye contact, has a lot to do with empathy and compassion, also lets us know how to read facial expressions. Also staring into, hopefully mom's eyes, the baby starts releasing oxytocin, and oxytocin is the hormone that helps us bond. Baby releases oxytocin, then mom releases oxytocin, and that's how they form a love affair. This is also where the baby gets horizontal eye tracking. Can track their caregivers coming and going. Also a very important skill in reading. If you can't track on a page, very hard to read. Those are the kids that read with their fingers or put a piece of paper under their things or a ruler. In terms of hearing, this little baby's not startling at every sound, but a threatening sound like a big dog barking is going to get that baby crying for help. In terms of tactile, this little baby feels the extremes, heat, cold, hunger, pain, and upon feeling any of those things, is going to be crying for help. In terms of mobility, this little baby's now crawling on the tummy. And crawling on the tummy begins primarily as a way of getting away from danger more than a way of getting to something. Crawling on the tummy is one of the major activities that helps organize the pons level, grow that myelin sheath strong, organize it, help it function optimally. Crawling on the tummy is also very important in terms of structure. It helps form the arch in our foot, brings our feet out so we're not walking pigeon-toed. It also helps form our cervical curve so we can stand up straight. Also works on our proximal joints, particularly shoulders and hips. In terms of language, this little baby has this vital cry that says, help me, save me, I'm dying. And no normal adult can resist going and seeing what's wrong with that Pons level infant, because that Pons level infant perceives things in black and white. I'm cold, I'm gonna die. I'm hungry, I'm gonna die. I'm not with mom, I'm going to die. And the only control they have over this situation is this vital cry. So hopefully baby puts out the cry, mom, dad, grandma, somebody comes and addresses that baby's needs. And that sets up the proper cycle of response. They can be trusting in the world. I watched a documentary about Romanian orphanages a few years ago, and the reporter that did the piece said the worst part about it was walking into a room of over 30 infants and having it be silent because they knew that crying wasn't going to get them anything. In terms of hand function, you can still put your finger in that baby's hand and she'll still hold on tight. But now when you try and lift her up before her shoulders leave the table, those little hands are going to open up. Now these first two levels I've just spoken about are actually separate organs in the brain. When we move up to the next level, the midbrain level is responsible for balancing, regulating, and filtering, and it is a region that encompasses many pieces, one of which is named the midbrain. It's technically the mid-cerebrum, but they called it the midbrain. In terms of vision, this baby now starts to appreciate detail. They can start to tell one person from another person. Some people say around 7 or 8 months old, babies get stranger anxiety. We say they just didn't know they were strangers before. And they also get vertical eye tracking, very important skill in reading and in math computation. They get the beginnings of convergence, or both eyes working together at near point, very important skill in reading comprehension, depth perception, and attention and focus. And the last thing in vision is the appreciation of detail within detail. Now, we've all had a problem with this at one time or another. You open your refrigerator and you're like, mustard, mustard, where's the mustard? And then you go back and you open the refrigerator and it's right there. But for some people, it's like that all the time. And sometimes it's the child you send in to clean their room, and you come back 20 minutes later, they're standing there with a sock in their hand, looking totally lost, and you have to break everything down for them. I'm going to put books on the shelf, clothes in the hamper, because it's just too overwhelming for them. In terms of hearing, this little baby's starting to appreciate tone of voice. You could say anything you want to that little baby. You could say, I'm going to sell you to the next passing stranger. And as long as you're saying it really nicely, everything's okay. Conversely, if you get into an argument and it gets a bit heated, even if it's not directed at the baby's going to start picking up on that, because this is the level of the brain that gives us the ability to read all those thousands of nonverbal social cues. And they do say that communication is 94% nonverbal, which is why I'm not a big fan of email and texting. In terms of tactile, this little baby starts to feel light touch. Down in the Pons, it was deep pain. Up here, it's light touch. So this baby is going to start appreciating warm, soft, fuzzy. Might get attached to a blankie or a little stuffed animal at this point. This is also where the baby gains proprioception, or knowing where she is in space. Like, this is my hand, it belongs to me. Can't see it anymore, but it's still my hand and it belongs to me. This is where I stop. That's where the world begins. This is my space. That's your space, and there are boundaries. In terms of mobility, this little baby's now creeping up on hands and knees, very goal-oriented into everything. And creeping on hands and knees is one of the major activities that organizes the midbrain level, helps it function optimally. It also is very important in terms of structure. Helps form our lumbar curve so we can stand up straight. Brings our feet back in so we're not walking like ducks. In terms of language, this little baby's babbling and cooing. Lots of sentences and paragraphs, but no actual words yet. Because this is the level of the brain that gives us the ability to make all the sounds that will later go into words. And you could tell how this baby is feeling by listening to their babbling and cooing. Because this is where we get intonation, modulation, inflection, volume control. I had a girl that came to me, and my office used to be in a professional building with lots of other professionals. And I had to have her come on Saturdays because she was so loud that she would disturb everybody else. She would be a half a block away and I'd know she was on her way. By about the third reevaluation, she could sit in the reception area and I couldn't hear her. Quite a difference. In terms of hand function, this baby now gets prehensile grasp, uses the whole hand to pick something up and they can start to feed themselves. This is also a level of the brain where our HPA axis, or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is developed. This is our stress response. It's supposed to give us overdrive gear for when we're under stress. So when you say, hurry, 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 let's get a move on, someone can actually kick up into higher gear. Unlike my son. When he was small, there were 2 words you couldn't say in our house for years, and those were hurry up. Because if you said hurry up, he was a puddle on the floor for an hour and a half. So no matter what speed we were going, we just kept going at the same speed. And the stress response can affect test anxiety, it can affect raging, it can affect so many things. So we get that to work well, a lot of things work better. Now, those first 3 levels that I've just spoken about develop in about the first year of life. And the first year of life is the most important year in our life. We will learn 50% of everything we know in the first year of our life. And those first 3 levels don't speak English, French, German, Spanish, Chinese. You can't speak to them with words. You can only speak to them with movement, reflex, and sensory experience. And they form the foundation that's supposed to carry us through the rest of our lives. And all the jobs that they're responsible for are things that need to happen automatically. You can't make them happen or will them to happen, at least not for very long. It would be like if you had to think about breathing. You could do that for a few minutes, but you certainly couldn't do it for 24/7. From the green on up on the chart, it is the cortex, or the thinking, intelligent part of our brain. The part that makes us human, not in terms of our soul, but in terms of what adult humans do. Walk, talk, read, write. 98% of the people I see have little or nothing wrong with their cortex. Intelligence is not the issue. It's she's so bright, but. He's so bright, but. And then just fill in the blanks. And that, I think, is what is so confusing and frustrating to parents, in that you know your child is smart. Why can't they do math? You know your child is smart. Why can't they concentrate? All of these things. And it's because they're in these very low precortical foundational levels. So in the cortex, I very rarely have anything to do there. It straightens itself out. Everything builds on everything else. In terms of, so I'm going to speak very quickly about the cortex. In terms of vision, this baby appreciates symbols. Picture of a cat represents a cat, but it's not a cat. To later on, CAT is another symbol for cat, and they're reading. In terms of hearing, this baby understands a couple words of speech, understands more and more till they have a complete vocabulary. In terms of hand function, this baby gets the beginnings of stereognosis, or knowing what's in their hand without looking at it, till you get to the point where you can put your hand in your pocket and pull out a quarter instead of a nickel. In terms of mobility, this little baby starts to walk, and they tend to start to walk with little arms up here like little tightrope walkers. Then they tend to go down and back. You might see them dragging a blankie or a little stuffed animal, till they're walking in a very nice cross pattern. In terms of hand function, this baby now gets cortical opposition. Not only eats the cookie, but goes back for the crumbs and every other little dust bunny right before they pop it in their mouth. And that's the beginnings of fine motor skills. When we get to the very top level, which is about age 6 for girls and 8 for boys, this is when we should become all lateralized or all dominant on one side. We should be right-eyed, right-eared, right-handed, and right-footed, or left, left, left. If we're not, it's a bit like having 2 vice presidents in our head. One side will say, I'll do this job for a while, but I'm kind of tired of it, so you take it over. The other side will say, okay, I'm going to do that for a while, but now it's your turn again. So it makes the way we take it and store information rather random and inefficient. Hard to retrieve. When we're all lateralized or dominant on one side, it's like having a president and a vice president. This is my job, this is your job, and we're going to do them the same way every day. So it makes everything much more orderly and efficient and easy to retrieve. So that was normal neurological development. Now we're going to talk about the developmental sequence. The activities at the Pons level for the developmental sequence. Crawling on the tummy. As I said, most children today in our society do none of this, which is very sad. And particularly children in orphanages rarely get to do any of this. There are specific whole body reflexive movements that every unimpaired, unimpeded infant does. And those are very important in terms of input, teaching the brain how to do what it needs to do. There are multifaceted sensory experiences. If you think about it, think of all the sensory experience that little baby gets. You're picking him up, you're changing the diapers, you're giving him a bath, you're wiping their face, you're doing so many things. Those are all, you're putting them over your shoulder, you're laying them down. All of those things are sensory experiences which they need to develop properly. Then there's the adequate cycle of response, having somebody respond to them when they cry. We say you can never spoil a Pons level infant. Pons level infants really need to know that their needs are going to be addressed. And that includes eye contact, so they can have comfortable eye contact. The developmental sequence for midbrain level, it's 5 to 14 months. And this is creeping on hands and knees. This is different. These are different specific whole body reflexive movements or patterns that again give input to the brain, teach the brain what it needs to do, triggering reflexes. Then midbrain level baby has different sensory experiences. They're now in the third dimension. They're dealing with balance, they're dealing with vestibular things, they're dealing with, as I say, different kinds of sensory experience. Now we're going to talk about abnormal function and what that might look like. I'm going to be listing a lot of things that it could look like. That doesn't mean that everybody who has an issue at that level of the brain has every single one of those things. When things aren't working at these low levels, they can manifest in so many different ways. One child could look like one side of the coin and the other child looks like the other side of the coin. So I'm giving you some examples. Down in the medulla, most parents won't see a whole lot of things wrong down there because the medulla is such a low level that when something is really wrong, you're in a coma or you're dead. I see people in comas, but if you're walking and talking and fairly functional, you don't have a whole lot wrong with your medulla. You could see pupils not perfectly round, and it could also, a poor sucking response could be a sign of something going on in the medulla. The pons. Again, this is where all of our fear and anxiety come from, where all of our feeling safe and secure, attached and bonded, or not safe, secure, attached and bonded come from. This is also the level that gives us that sense of I deserve to be in the world and the world is an okay place. In terms of vision, this child might have eyes that turn in. And that's a visual motor skill. It's not a matter of vision per se. They could have 20/20 vision. But it's a matter of the signal that the brain is sending to the muscles of the eyes. And that's why so many kids, I've seen kids that have 5 different eye surgeries trying to correct their eyes. They tighten one muscle and another muscle loosens. They loosen another muscle tightens because it's not a muscle problem, it's a brain problem, the signal that the brain is sending to the muscles of the eyes. This child could have poor eye contact, and eye contact generally is not an I won't, it's an I can't. If the mirror neuron system is not working correctly, it's painful to look someone in the eye. It's not an I won't. Practicing won't help. It helps a little, but it's still not going to get it to be automatic, which it should be. It should be natural and automatic. How can you be truly intimate with anyone and love someone if you can't look them in the eye? So we want to get those, and all of the things that I'm speaking about are things that we're going to address with this program. Difficulty bonding. Again, if you can't look somebody in the eye, how can you be bonded to them? This is also horizontal eye tracking. If your eyes are jumping around, you're the person that's skipping words or reading them over again. It's such hard work. Your eyes get tired. And these are the kids that don't read well, don't like to read. It's hard work. It's not getting any easier. It's not a matter of intelligence again. It's a matter of visual motor skills. Just about every child that comes into me with a reading issue has a visual motor skill issue. Auditorily, this child might be afraid of sounds that they should not be afraid of. Sounds that they've heard over and over again. Say the vacuum cleaner, a toilet flushing. They know what that sound is, but it's triggering a response in them of fear. And this is going back to that Pons level where the Pons level infant would react that way. They're sort of stuck in that level. And it also has to do with reflexes, which we address. This also could be the child that perceives voices as angry even though they're not. They're misreading them. And I have a little girl in California who tells her mom that nobody likes her at school. And the mom's like, really? Because when I drop you off, 15 kids come up to you, giving you hugs and high fives and all of these things. They certainly look like they like you. But she's not perceiving it that way. She's perceiving it that they don't like her because she's not able to read those cues correctly. In terms of tactile, this could be a person who does not feel pain appropriately, who has a very high pain tolerance. He falls down, he gets back up, and he just brushes it off. This is not a good thing. And I see lots of kids with high pain tolerances. First of all, pain is there to be our friend. It's there to let you know you're hurt, pay attention, stop doing that. It's also there to give us healthy fear. I shouldn't jump off the roof. That might hurt me. I shouldn't run out in the street. That might hurt me if a car hit me. A lot of the kids that I see become risk takers because they don't understand things would hurt them or that they want to feel. I have children that will jump off the backs of couches and land on their knees over and over and over again because they want to feel something. It doesn't feel good not to feel. And so they try and do things to feel. In fact, for girls, they tend, and a lot of times they're pickers. They pick at their scabs or their little owies. They will pull off their toenails. They will become older and start cutting, doing things to feel. Boys tend to become more of the risk takers, the bungee jumping, skydiving, dirt biking, rock climbing, anything for a rush kind of a thing because they're trying to feel. Now, feeling appropriately also has to do with true empathy and true compassion. If you hit me, it doesn't hurt me, why shouldn't I hit you? If you fall down, why shouldn't I laugh? Because it really wouldn't hurt me. And I did have a girl whose mother fell down a flight of wooden stairs so badly that she had to be taken away by ambulance, and the girl just sat up at the top laughing. She just didn't get it. Now, we can be taught empathy over and over and over again. This is the way you respond. She's hurt, go over and say, I'm sorry. Can I help you? But it's not the same as knowing how it feels. I understand you're hurting. Can I help you? So to get true empathy and true compassion, you need to have an appropriate pain perception. We find that when we get the pain perception in line, everything, all the emotional feelings come right along with it. My younger son, I thought, was the best little toddler in the whole world. He'd fall down, get back up, and never cry. I thought, what a good little guy he is. He was such a good little guy because he felt no pain. Not no pain, but had a very high pain tolerance. So when he fell down, it really didn't bother him. We now feel pain. In fact, he dropped a big heavy piece of furniture on his foot the other day, helping me, and he screamed at me, why did you ever make me feel pain? Because I wanted him to know if his foot was broken. And I do have kids whose feet or legs or arms or collarbones are broken, and they don't even tell their parents for 2 days. So this is not a good thing. Also, this is where we get that real clear switch of I'm hungry, I'm full. And very important switch. I know we have children who won't eat because they're never hungry. Why would you eat if you're never hungry? Why would you stop eating if you're never full? So we like to get those, a lot of the kids, those switches are on dim. They're not working very well. So we get the switches really clear, things clear up. This is also where eating disorders come in. Because if you don't know you're hungry or full, eating becomes a big trauma. Mom's trying to feed you, you don't want to eat. Mom's trying to take food away from you, you want to eat. So we would like to get that in particular corrected. Also, this is toileting issues because a lot of times the kids don't feel the sensations of going to the bathroom when they need to. I'll ask parents, when they go, do they have to go now? They'll say, well, yeah, it's because, they're too into what they're doing. They just don't want to stop. And that's what it looks like to parents, but generally that's not it. It's that they're not feeling it until the very last second. And then they've got to go, and half the time they don't make it all the way. Same thing with bedwetting at night. You don't wake up because the sensations aren't strong enough. And that goes along with feeling that deep pain. not feeling it correctly. So when we get them to feel pain correctly, in fact, that's one of the ways I get young moms to put their babies on their tummies is I say if they do tummy crawling, they'll toilet train on time and appropriately. So that's a good motivator for them. There are other motivators too, but that one works pretty well. Mobility-wise, some kids actually refuse to lay on their stomachs. Even laying on their stomach makes them feel awful, because laying on your tummy starts opening up that Pons level, which is all emotion with no words attached. So sometimes we have to start just by getting them comfortable on their tummies. This also can be the child that's pigeon-toed. And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, very few people were pigeon-toed. If you saw somebody that was pigeon-toed, it was kind of a rare thing, and everybody kind of made a big deal about it. If you look at people now, it's amazing how many people are pigeon-toed. And that's because they're not doing tummy crawling. Also, it can be the person with the poor cervical curve here with their head just jutting forward like this. Also, it can be flat feet, because this is what helps form the arch of the foot. Now, about 50% of flat-footedness is genetic, so we can't do anything about that. But the other 50% is because they didn't do the tummy crawling. Also going to be like he walks like a bear, like this, instead of like this. Language-wise, this child is in perpetual fight or flight or freeze. This is a very unhappy place to live. This is survival mode, 100%. I'm in survival mode. So what do I have to be? I have to control, I have to be manipulative, I have to be hypervigilant. And hypervigilance is needing to know what that sound is, where am I going, where are we going, when are we going to be there, who's coming over, who's on the phone. And this can actually look like ADD or ADHD, because having to know what's going past the window because it might hurt me, I'm in survival mode, or what's Johnny doing over there, because again, might hurt me, I'm in survival mode, can be just as distracting as having a poor filtering system, which is what ADD is, which we'll talk about later. This can be the child that's got huge anxiety or fearfulness, afraid of everything, anxious about everything, can be very clingy, can be like the Velcro kid. One mom that came in and said, I have a Velcro child, if you could just get her off me, that would be great. We did. But some parents say, yeah, they're really attached, but they're attached to their leg for dear life, which is not the same thing. They can, a lot of times Pons level kids who have a lot of things going at the Pons level love to create chaos. They love to stir everybody up, get everybody else going, and then they can sit back and go, ah, that's okay now, because it's more input for them. Manually, you might see kids walking around like this with the thumbs in their fists. That really says that they're not feeling safe, they're not feeling secure, they're not feeling good in the world. And I'm seeing more and more biological kids who are feeling that way because they did not do tummy crawling. They don't get that sense of security, even though they have good parents and they have not been neglected or abused, but because they didn't do the tummy crawling, they're not feeling as safe in the world. And my goal for everybody is to help them be a happier soul. That's what my goal for everybody I see is. And if you don't have a good Pons, it's really hard to be a happy soul. I don't do diagnoses, legally I can't, but also I don't really believe in them. But I talk about diagnoses because most people are familiar with them. So some of the diagnoses at the Pons level might be, any of the attachment disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, chronic stress disorders, and all of the eating disorders are things that are mostly Pons. Now we're going to speak about the midbrain level. And the midbrain is responsible for balancing, regulating, and filtering everything. This is also the level of the brain where all of our neurochemicals are regulated. It's where our autoimmune system is regulated. In terms of vision, this child's eyes might turn out, or adults. They used to call it lazy eye. It's actually a divergent strabismus. And again, this is not a matter of vision. This is a matter of the signal that the brain is sending to the muscles of the eyes. Every detail can get this child's attention because those eyes are not focusing on the teacher. One's over here going, oh, what's that going past the window? What's that over there? What's Johnny doing over there? What's Jane doing over there? So it makes it very hard to focus. These are children or adults that can't read facial expression. They might get the big things like she's laughing, she's happy, she's crying, she's sad, she's yelling, she's mad. But all those subtle things are very important, and those are ones that they may not pick up on. And it could be the kid too that doesn't see the obvious details. Where are my shoes? And the shoes are sitting in the middle of the floor, but where are my shoes? Can't find my shoes. Because everything's just too kind of overwhelming for them. This is also vertical eye tracking, so if they have poor vertical eye tracking, this can be the child that skips lines, that has poor reading comprehension, has trouble carrying math down into lines. And when eyes don't work together, if they're turning out, it can also affect depth perception, so it can add into the clumsy picture. Not always, but a lot of times it does. These are also kids that when they get tired, the words, I asked one little girl, do the words ever get blurry or move on the page? She says, no. Not until they dance off the end of the line. Don't they do that for everyone? And again, children think that things are normal. They're normal for them. So a lot of times we don't even know what the child is seeing because it's normal for them. Auditorily, this is the level of the brain that's supposed to act like our filter. It's supposed to let us prioritize. Right now I'm talking, but I bet there's some other sounds that you're hearing, other things going on. Now, if your filtering system's working appropriately, you can say, well, I'm going to listen to Nina right now. Put all the rest of those things in the background, unless a fire engine goes by or something else happens that you have to switch your priority. But if your filtering system is not working appropriately, everything is just as important as everything else. And so it's very hard to stay on task. This is just important as what the teacher is saying. So it's constant extra stress because you're getting bombarded with all the stimuli up here at this level instead of most things just being down in the background. And in order to actually, if your filtering system's not working appropriately, in order to actually do something that you really love to do and want to do, people tend to hyper-focus. Like some parents will say, well, he can concentrate on his Legos for 2 hours. Well, in that 2 hours while he's concentrating on his Legos, in order to get his attention, you practically have to go over and shake him. Because in order to do what he loves to do, he has blocked everything else out. So he can focus on what he really wants to do. When we really, really want to do something and really, really have the motivation, we can focus all our cortical power and all of our power on that thing and we can get it done for a bit, but not for very long. And not if you're not real motivated. It has to be extremely motivating. This also can be poor auditory processing. Auditory processing is sporadic. So when you have problems with auditory processing, you could hear something 2 or 3 times correctly, and the 4th time it could be gobbledygook. So how do you know which one is right? It can be very frustrating for the kids to not know what's right and what's wrong. This can also be noise sensitivity, sound sensitivity. The kids that are always putting their hands over their ears because everything's too loud, too much. They might not like to go to a fair or a mall or anything like that because it's way too overstimulating for them. Can't deal with all of that sensory input because their filter's not working correctly. Tactily, this is the child that might be affected by tags and socks and waistbands and shoes and all of those kinds of things, textures of clothes. I call it the princess and the pea syndrome. I had one mom that brought this lovely little 4-year-old in to see me, darling little girl, and the only complaint she had about her daughter was that she could only wear 4 articles of clothes. Not 4 outfits, 4 articles. And it wasn't because of the way they looked, it was because of the way they felt. So she was so sensitive that those were the only things she could wear. And after about 4 reevaluations, The mom came in and said, "Look, she's wearing jeans." And she actually got to go out and shop with her daughter for clothes based on the way they looked rather than on the way they felt. So it's very frustrating to feel this way, particularly as a parent who doesn't feel this way. It kind of looks like the kid's just being obstinate, but it really is painful for them. They're feeling too much. Again, their filtering system is letting too much into this light touch. And there are a lot of children that are hypersensitive to light touch. Some little scratch or paper cut can be the end of the world, but they're hyposensitive to deep pain down in the pons, and a broken bone doesn't feel so bad. Again, very confusing for parents because every little thing, they're a drama queen, but a big thing, not so much. This also can be the child that resists hugs and cuddles. They don't feel good to them. This also can be the child that's clumsy, bumps into things, bumping into the corners of tables, stepping on people's feet, bumping into the door jambs. Also the child that has a problem with personal space. Because knowing where we are in space or proprioception is how we get that sense of my space, your space, boundaries. And it should be innate. It's not something easy to teach, as teachers will tell you. Now, when I went to school 100 years ago, nobody talked about arm's lengths, personal bubbles. Nobody. Because we knew it. We just knew it. One or two kids in the class would be the kids that we were kind of like, back up. But other than that, we all knew it. Today, half the class doesn't know where they are in space. So they're trying to teach it. We go to the root of the problem, give them the sense of where they are. We say we want to get them literally and figuratively grounded. So they have a sense of where they are in the world, because not knowing where you are in space also can lead to a general sense of insecurity. I don't know where I am. It's also the kid that walks in the room and touches everything. I have one boy that by the time I've gotten to my desk, he's touched everything in my office. And I haven't even sat down yet. And it's really not that he's trying to be obnoxious. He's trying to verify where everything is. Same thing with the kids in line that are poking and prodding and looking really obnoxious. Generally, that's not why they're doing it. They are doing it to verify, where are you, where am I? Can also be the child that puts things in their mouth constantly. So that's something else we work on. This is also the level of the brain we work on with the corpus callosum. Now, the corpus callosum is the bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain. It's how the two sides communicate. The corpus callosum is technically in the cortex, but it's the midbrain level activities that put it in place, so that's why I speak about it in the midbrain level. Corpus callosum is so important. We need both sides of our brain to be good, balanced humans. I don't want people to be right-brained or left-brained. I want them to be whole-brained. It can have poor short-term memory because you teach little Johnny a math problem, he does it, he's got it fine. The next day you go and ask him to do it again, he looks at you like he's never seen that problem before. And to him, he hasn't. Yesterday he was functioning in this side of the brain, did the problem, knew it. Now he's functioning over here, and it's like and that corpus callosum isn't working at that moment. So it's like he never did it. You say, Timmy, don't go play by the river. And Timmy goes and plays by the river. And you say, Timmy, I told you not to play by the river. No, you didn't. I don't remember. And that is true to him at that moment. So, and it's not that the corpus callosum never works, because it does work sometimes. But when it doesn't work, it's almost as if you're lying to them. And because she never said that to me. I don't care how many times she tells me she said that. She never said that. She didn't tell me to do that. She didn't tell me not to do that. I never saw that math problem before. Later on, they might remember. But that's later on, not right away. Also, poor impulse control, because one side of the brain has the go or the impulse. The other side of the brain has the stops or the consequences. And if they're not speaking together at the nanosecond that they need to be speaking together, there is nothing to stop that impulse. It doesn't matter if you've had the same consequence 400 times. I have kids that'll do something and 2 seconds later go, oh, why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. Maybe 10 minutes later they might go, ooh, I don't think I should have done that. Sometimes it never catches up. But they don't get good cause and effect. I do this, this is going to happen. Also, time management or realization of time can be very difficult when your corpus callosum isn't working. Tomorrow is the same thing as 2 weeks, is the same thing as 2 years. Don't really have a sense of time. Can also be common sense, which is very important. It can be reversal of letters and numbers. Everybody who comes into me with a diagnosis of dyslexia does have a corpus callosum issue. That does not mean that everyone that has a corpus callosum issue has dyslexia. They don't go both ways. It can cause a very high frustration level because it's like, why don't I remember? Why are they telling me I should remember? I think I should know this. Why don't I know it? Very frustrating. And in boys, it tends to come out in big behavior issues. In girls, it tends to come out more in academics. That's just being very general. It can be the child that can't cross midline. I believe it's Japan that in order to get into kindergarten, you have to be able to do this. You'd be amazed at how many kids can't do that. So getting that midline to work is so important and changes so many things for so many kids. And a lot of the boys in particular, when their corpus callosum doesn't work well, they tend to hang out in one side of their brain more than the other in order to mitigate the problems. It tends to be the left side, the more concrete, analytical, facts and figures, how does it work side. And our world isn't black and white, there's a lot of gray in it. So we need both sides to get that balance going. The reason boys are able to do this more is as women, we come into the world with a 30% larger corpus callosum than men. That's just in our DNA. We are the multitaskers. Men come in with a larger spatial planning center. They're the builders, if you want to be quite general. We use our corpus callosum more often. Boys use it less. And that's why men are better able to compartmentalize. And that's why they're able to stick in one side of their brain more than the other to try and mitigate these problems. Of course, it's not conscious. This is just how their brain has handled it. Mobility. This child might have poor balance. Their feet might turn out, might be clumsy. I have one mom that says, yeah, he can't walk across the floor without tripping and there's nothing in the way except his feet. It could have the poor lumbar spinal curve. It could also be excessively flexible. I have kids that come into my office that look like marionettes. I have one little girl whose mom, when she takes her hand to walk across the street, now she's not dragging her or yanking her or anything, her elbow dislocates because she's so loose. This is not a good thing. When we're working at the midbrain level, we're working particularly on one of the things we're working on is the cerebellum, which is back here, and it's in charge of all of our gross motor planning, and about how tight and how loose everything's supposed to be. Muscles, ligaments, tendons, all of those things are controlled at that level of the brain. And I have a man who came in to see me with a stroke. And when he came in to see me, he was in a wheelchair with his right side paralyzed. He'd already been through PT and OT and all those things. And so we started doing program with him, and the first time he was in the wheelchair, and the second time he was in a walker, and the third time he used a cane, and the fourth time he used nothing. And his leg was getting better quite quickly, and that's because you're putting demand on it. In order to walk, you really have to put a lot of demand on that leg. So the leg got better quite quickly. The one thing that wasn't getting better so quickly was his hand, and he was still quite upset about that. So I said, well, if you want your hand to get better, just do more program. He says, well, I'm already doing 2 hours of PT and OT also, so I don't have the time to do it. And I said, so what are you doing for this, hand? He said, well, I'm lifting weights. I have this little roller thing that opens it up. I'm doing all these exercises. And I'm like, did you hurt your arm? He said, no. I said, you hurt your brain. And if that really was going to help, all these lifting weights and all that stuff, this arm should look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But it doesn't, because the brain's still not giving the right signal to that arm. So he started doing more neuro, and he's now taking care of his 47 acres all by himself. And because again, we go to the level of the brain that controls how tight or how loose everything is. And that has to do with high muscle tone and low muscle tone. I see lots of kids who have Down syndrome, lots of babies. I can't correct Down syndrome because that's a chromosomal dysfunction, but I can maximize benefits and change so they don't have the low muscle tone, they don't have the same body shape, and things are different. I have a girl in college now who's Downs, and she doesn't have an aide or anything else. She's just going to college. And most people don't know she has Down syndrome because she has maximized her potentials. In terms of language at the midbrain level, this is a child or an adult who can't articulate well, has poor enunciation, can't make the sounds. Now, speech therapy is great. It can really help people. But speech therapy teaches us how to speak, where to put your lips, where to put your tongue, how to move air. And we shouldn't have to be taught to speak. It should be automatic. We go to the level of the brain that makes it automatic. We get the right signals to the muscles of the face and the mouth, and we start being able to make the sounds correctly. Also, we have to be able to hear the sounds correctly. That goes back to the auditory and the auditory processing. If you don't hear the sounds correctly, you can't put them out correctly. Also, stuttering can be a problem here. Mumbling, some kids are just always talking inside their mouth and you can't hardly understand them, and so we want to get it clear. And then there's the volume control, always speaking too loudly or too softly. And this could be the child that perseverates over and over and over again, the same question, the same word, over and over and over again. Also could be the child that is completely monotone. And if the child's completely monotone, or the adult, kind of tells us that they're not hearing things correctly. Because if you're not hearing things, if you're hearing things monotone, you're going to put things monotone out. If you're hearing them correctly, you're much more likely to have inflection and modulation in your voice. In terms of hand function, this kid might have this goofy pencil grip. I have kids that have the pencil grip that is so goofy, I don't even know how to make my hand do it. I can't even get my hand in the position that they're putting their pencil in. It's just crazy to see the way they do it. And actually fine motor, the ability to hold the pencil and everything else starts with tummy crawling. This can be the child that can't cut food well. We had a girl who came to us in the 6th grade, and they actually came to us because of learning, because she would have rages during homework, and it would take 4 hours to get her homework done while she threw chairs and things. But one of the side little things was that the dad said she can't cut meat. She's in the 6th grade, and she cannot cut meat. She massacres it. It's embarrassing. We still have to cut her meat. And after they did program for 2 weeks, he called and he said, "This can't possibly be already, can it?" I'm like, "Well, what?" And he said, "We had pork chops last night, and she cut them nicely." And I said, "Well, have you changed anything else?" He says, "No." I said, "Yes, it's program." So he was thrilled that she could cut her meat. She eventually got to do her homework. This can be just poor fine motor skills, and also poor stress response, that HPA axis. This is where you can't, test anxiety, for instance. Test anxiety is usually a neurological issue. It's one thing if you haven't studied for the test, then you should be anxious. But most people with test anxiety have studied for the test. They do know the information, but when they get in there, instead of that HPA axis building them up and going, "Okay, here you go," it's shutting them down and they're decompensating and they can't retrieve the information. In terms of diagnoses at the midbrain level, this can be ADD, ADHD, it can be all the autism spectrum disorders, all the learning disabilities, dyslexia, obsessive compulsive disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, which is the one I don't like the most because it makes it sound like that child is just doing that to tick you off. And there really is a neurological basis for it. Allergies and autoimmune issues are in the midbrain. Bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, cerebral palsy, all of those are in the midbrain level. The cortex, as I said before, most of the people that I see have little or nothing wrong with their cortex. When we get the foundational levels corrected, the cortex goes off and does what it's supposed to do. Get the good foundation and the house becomes a good house. But this child might see blurry or double and maybe sequencing can be a little tricky. This has to do with the eye function because convergence is actually a function of the cortex, but it again is the midbrain activities that put it in place. This can be problems with abstract thought, stemming a lot from not being all lateralized or all dominant on one side. And then there are also genetic disorders. As I said, I work with children with different genetic disorders. We don't change the genetic disorder. We just maximize potentials. We're now going to start talking about what are the program elements. What does this program look like? How do we replicate normal neurological development? The first thing that goes into this are what I call whole body reflexive movements or patterns. We actually have 32 of them. They're things that every normal, unimpaired, unimpeded infant does starting in utero. And we go up through about age 6, but most of them are before the age of 1. And these patterns trigger reflexes. The trigger of movement, the triggers brain growth. And it's a cycle. It's like a spiral. New patterns trigger new movement, that triggers new brain growth. And that's how we develop good neurology. Patterns do need to be done correctly. They're giving input to the brain. They're like putting the software in the computer. If you don't do them correctly, they don't count. One thing I do want to say, which I sometimes forget to say, and hopefully I'll say it more than once, is I don't want you to listen to any piece of this and think that you can just go away and do some creeping and some crawling and everything will be better, because it won't. You need the whole picture. In the developmental sequence, we develop globally. We develop everything all at once. We develop auditorily, visually, tactily, mobility, language, and hand function all at the same time. And that's why our program works so well, is we are not just targeting auditory. We're not just targeting visual. We're doing everything the way the brain wants to be triggered. Because the brain is so phenomenal, you just need to know the right triggers and the right stimulus. So one of the main things are patterns, and they need to be done correctly, and they are assigned very carefully. And there's a picture on one of my PowerPoint of 2 little twins doing one of the patterns. I was teaching their older sister this pattern, and the mom sent me these pictures of her twins doing the patterns together. We didn't make them up. Normal babies do them. This is what we do. Then there's floor time, creeping and crawling. Now we call on the belly crawling and we call hands and knees creeping. Those are the correct terms. But I always try and say belly and hands and knees so that we'll know, because most people do think the reverse. Crawling on the tummy, creeping on hands and knees should never be taught. Most of the people I see are very bright, and I could teach them how to creep and crawl in a half an hour if I really worked with them. But that would be teaching their cortex, or the thinking intelligent part of the brain. Like teaching them a new dance step, and it would not help the Pons or the midbrain level. It's the evolution or the process of going from where they are now to a nice finished crawl that organizes that level and changes it, grows the connections. And if you think about it, you never teach an infant how to crawl, do you? No. And you don't put an infant down on the floor and have them just crawl away beautifully. They try all sorts of things before they get a move on. And it's that process that we're looking for. But again, we need good input in order to get the good output. Creeping and crawling are the output. Sensory and patterns are the input. And it can be the hardest task, because this is hard work and it's boring. There's no getting around it. We try and make it fun, but it's still hard work and it's still boring. Sensory stimulation. Sensory stimulation is input for the peripheral and the central nervous system, and it comes in many forms. And this is one of the things that varies the most with my clients, in that it could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be tactile, it could be smell, it could be all of these things, it could be one or the other. So it's very case by case as to what kind of sensory people need to do. But the brain does like to be surprised. And so one of the things we do with sensory that's different than anyone else is we do very many little tiny short bursts of things. Instead of a lot all at once, because the brain pretty much fires at 100% and then says, I don't care what you're doing anymore. So we want everybody's time, every second you put into this program, to count 100%. So it's very many little tiny bursts to keep the brain surprised. The next thing is vestibular stimulation, and vestibular stimulation is rolling, rocking, spinning, moving your head through space and stopping. And a lot of variety is necessary. This is another place where the brain likes to be surprised, so we do very many little tiny bursts of things. Kids love this one. This is the one they do love, jumping and rolling and spinning and all those things that kids like to do. And dads hang them upside down by their ankles, which is great. This is very critical for supporting those visual motor skills. The vestibular nerves are right next to the ocular nerves that control the muscles of the eyes. And so when you stimulate the vestibular, you stimulate the ocular. And so I had a family that came in with a brother and sister that I evaluated, and they came back for their first reevaluation in 2 months, and the mom said, they really like vestibular, so we've been doing more. And I said, well, that's just great. More of anything's good. She said, no, we've really been doing more, like 4 times more. And I said, well, that's okay. I use it as treats. You do your crawling, you get into the vestibular. And I reevaluated them, and their eyes were so much better, I almost fell off my chair. I knew that vestibular helped the eyes, but boy, these guys' eyes were really better. And that day I also saw a boy who, one thing they weren't getting done was the vestibular. And his eyes were a little better, but certainly nothing like these other kids. So it also stimulates and supports the whole midbrain level. Now we're going to talk about program, getting started and succeeding. How do we do this? What does a program look like? How does a program progress? There's an initial evaluation, and an initial evaluation is about 3 hours, during which I take a developmental history and present concerns. I go over lots and lots of details, ask lots of questions about why you're here, what are your concerns. Then I do a functional neurological exam. I give a verbal report of findings, and then I develop and teach you a program to do at home, because this is all a home-based program. This is something you need to do on a daily basis. So you're the best person to do it. By the time you're done with initial evaluation, you're good to go. Then I see you every 2 to 3 months when I'm traveling, and I do travel all over the country seeing people. And because as the neurology changes, your program has to change. Just like a 2-month-old isn't the same as a 6-month-old, things have to change as we start at the very lowest level that we see any dysfunction, and we work our way up. So the program does change. And we repeat these until all the issues are resolved, my testing looks good, and you have no more concerns. Then you're graduated. What is a functional neurological exam? It assesses different levels of the brain looking for neurological soft signs. These are things like reflexes, responses to reflexes, and sophistication of responses to reflexes. So it is a very easy evaluation. The kids think I'm playing silly, goofy games, and when we're done, they go, really? That's it? I do look at creeping and crawling on the tummy is like a window into the Pons level of development. Because if you have done tummy crawling, done enough of it, gotten to a nice finished crawl, and there is a beautiful, lovely, fluid, organized, finished crawl, and you haven't had a brain injury or a major trauma since, you get right back down and do that beautiful crawl. It's like a reflex. We don't forget. I've had 70-year-olds come into my office and do a beautiful finished crawl. Watching the way you move lets me know how finished is that Pons level. Same thing with hands and knees. Hands and knees creeping is a window into the midbrain level. Again, if you did enough, got it to a nice finished creep, and hadn't had a head injury or trauma since, you get right back down and do that beautiful creep. So it tells me, is it finished or is it not? A typical program is about an hour a day, although it takes longer than an hour most of the time, particularly to start with, because of transitions. There are many little things that go into that hour. Most people don't do it all at once. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Every family is different, every dynamic is different, and I work very hard with people to see if we can get something that works for their family. Most children are resistant. That's just a fact. We try and make this fun. I'd made up 2,000 different games when I did this with my kids. Because whatever you do with them, in a couple days it'll be old. So you have to come up with something new. And we just did the silliest, goofy games. I also did homeschooling while we were on the tummy. I also read books to them. We ate breakfast on the floor. We did all sorts of things. And it's important to keep switching it up, because the parent's job is to be the cheerleader more than the drill sergeant, even though drill sergeant has to come out. But parents' job is to motivate, distract, entertain, to get them to do this. This is not something you're just going to say, go do your program and have them go do it. It's not going to happen. There is a learning curve with this. This is new for everybody, so we start slowly, work our way up. And a positive sign of change is often regression. Things often look worse before they look better. This is a positive sign that we're affecting change at the levels we want to affect, but sometimes it can look worse before it looks better. I always like to know about it if you do, but it's a positive sign, and when you get to the other side, things always look better. This program is not a quick, easy fix, but it is a permanent, lasting solution. How do you succeed? It has to become a priority. Nothing happens unless program gets done. It must be a priority. I started this program and failed miserably for 1.5 years with it, with my children, because we'd do it, we wouldn't do it, we'd do it, we wouldn't do it. It never really became a priority. I didn't have a schedule, I didn't have a chart, which is very important. Finally, somebody gave me a schedule and a chart. This was way before computers, so it wasn't so easy. And I got serious, and we got better and graduated. You have to be prepared for everything, illness, being busy. You know, you can have a busy day schedule, like half a day, half of everything. Just be prepared. And you don't have to do all the program yourself. You can hire people or recruit people. It's great if dads will do it. I hired the teenager down the street, teenage boy, to come over and creep and crawl with my kids while I was cooking dinner. That was great. They thought it was super. This 15-year-old boy was creeping and crawling with them. Yay, you know. But I also have clients that have hired college students that rotate and come and take their kids and do the program. So it doesn't have to be you. And even having a day or two off from it can be remarkable. And also it switches things up and keeps things kind of fresh for the child, because they'll have different ideas and the dynamic changes. So you don't have to be the one to do it all. And you should have rewards for your child and yourself. This is hard work. I think a child deserves something every day. Something little, but something tangible. Also know it's a long-term commitment, but you know, when you're done, you're done. Again, you put the time in now, or you put the time in forever, managing these issues. You have to have a lot of motivators in place, because this is not a fun program. And I tell parents, what if you've got a brand new treadmill, you're going to get all in shape, and you put that brand new treadmill and you set it up right in front of a blank white wall. No TV, no radio, no book, nothing. How long do you think you're going to stay on there? Not very long. So, got to entertain, motivate, use a support system, and there are support systems out there now. There are Yahoo groups. We have a number of them. There's myself. You know, if you're not feeling successful, get online, call somebody. They'll tell you a story, and you'll get back on board. You can do it. It can be done. Now, what else can help promote neurological healing? Well, there is psychological counseling, and some of the kids who have a lot of Pons level trauma do need psychological counseling. There's also listening programs, auditory processing programs that can help speed the process. And there's audio-visual entrainment. It can help with sleep. It can help with relaxation and restoration. It can get kids calmer. So it can be a wonderful thing. It can also be a wonderful thing for the parents, which I try and take care of, because if the parents aren't in good shape, then who's going to take care of the kids? And there are also nutritional biomed things, and I find that every child that doesn't get better the way I think they should get better, that they are doing the program and they're not responding, it's always something nutritional or biomed in terms of leaky gut, food sensitivities, heavy metals, something. And it's quite a puzzle to put it together, but I do help families work on that and figure out that puzzle. Because once we figure out that puzzle, things get better, because the gut is the little brain. The gut responds first. If the gut is inflamed, the brain is inflamed. And if you have an inflamed brain, it's very hard to heal it. So that is something else that we work very hard on. Also, structural adjustments, craniosacral, chiropractic, osteopath, I think is very important. As we're working on this program, we are working on structure. And if the structure is off to begin with, it makes our job harder. And I'm all for making everything as easy as can be. So some kind of structural adjustments generally speed the progress. Go ahead and contact me if you have any further questions, and thank you very much.